The phone rings 3 times before Tommy Knuckles O'Brien realizes nobody's picking up. It's a Tuesday night in Hell's Kitchen, 1961, and the silence on the other end of that line feels heavier than it should. Tommy's been moving product through Harlem for 6 months now. Smooth as butter, no pushback, no problems. The numbers boys, the policy runners, the jazz club managers, they all played ball. Easy money. So easy that Tommy started wondering if maybe the old stories about Harlem were just that. Stories. He dials again. Same result. Dead air. Not even a busy signal. Just that hollow click that makes your stomach drop. Try Marcus, he tells his boy Fitzy, who's leaning against the wall picking his teeth with a matchstick. He always picks up. Fitzy tries. Nothing. They try Lenny at the barber shop on 125th. Nothing. They try Big Rose who runs numbers out of the church basement. Nothing. They try 6 more names in 15 minutes. And by the time they're done, both men are staring at each other with that particular kind of confusion that comes right before fear sets in. Maybe the lines are down, Fitzy offers, but his voice lacks conviction. Tommy shakes his head slow. All of them? At the same time? 3 weeks earlier, a message had come through. Simple, direct, the kind you don't misunderstand. Stay west of 8th Avenue, this is your only warning. It came from Bumpy Johnson's people, delivered by some kid who couldn't have been more than 19, wearing a pressed shirt and speaking like he was reading from a script. The Westies had laughed. Actually laughed. Not just chuckled or smirked. Full-on belly laughs that echoed through O'Malley's pub on 10th Avenue. Bumpy Johnson? One of the boys had said, tears in his eyes. That old man still breathing? What's he gonna do? Bore us to death with stories about the good old days? They'd been expanding for months. Started in Hell's Kitchen, pushed into Chelsea, then started creeping east. Harlem looked ripe, stable, quiet, controlled without being loud about it. The kind of place that had gone soft in their estimation. No shootings in the papers, no bodies in the Hudson, no explosions, no war, just business as usual, which to the Westies meant nobody was really in charge anymore. Send the kid back, Tommy had said, wiping tears from his eyes. Tell Bumpy Johnson we appreciate the concern, but Harlem's open for business now. New management. What? Kid had nodded once, turned on his heel and left without another word. Now standing in that cramped office with a dead phone in his hand, Tommy O'Brien feels something crawling up his spine. It's not fear exactly. Not yet. It's worse. It's the first whisper of understanding that maybe, just maybe, they'd misread the situation entirely. Get the car, he tells Fitzy. We're going to Harlem. Tonight? Right now? Would you have laughed at that warning? Or would you have seen what was coming? Subscribe and stay with me because what happened next became the blueprint for how real power moves in silence, and why sometimes the most dangerous response is no response at all. To understand what the Westies walked into, you need to understand what Harlem was in 1961. This wasn't just a neighborhood. It was an ecosystem, a living, breathing organism that had survived the Depression, the war, urban renewal, and every mob family in New York trying to take a piece. And, at the center of it all, quiet as a church mouse but twice as attentive, sat Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson. Bumpy didn't look like power. That was his greatest advantage. He was 63 years old by then, soft-spoken, always impeccably dressed in suits that cost more than most men made in a month. He didn't carry guns anymore. Didn't need to. His power wasn't in muscle. It was in architecture. He'd spent 3 decades building a network so intricate, so deeply woven into the fabric of Harlem, that pulling one thread meant unraveling everything. He knew the policy numbers before they hit the street. He knew which cops were on the take and which ones actually cared. He knew who owed who money, who was sleeping with whose wife, who had a gambling problem, who had a sick kid that needed medicine. Information was his currency, and he spent it wisely. The legitimate businesses loved him because he kept the streets safe for commerce. The illegal operations respected him because he never got greedy, never squeezed too hard. He took his percentage and made sure everyone else could eat. It was sustainable. It was smart. It was the opposite of chaos. The Westies, meanwhile, represented everything Harlem wasn't. They came up in Hell's Kitchen during the 50s, a collection of Irish toughs who made their bones through sheer brutality. Where the Italian mob had structure and the black syndicates had sophistication, the Westies had violence and unpredictability. They didn't negotiate, they eliminated. They didn't build, they conquered. Mickey Spillane ran them for years, but by the early 60s, younger wolves like Tommy O'Brien were pushing for expansion. Hell's Kitchen was locked down, but it was small, limited. Harlem was bigger, richer, and to their eyes, undefended. Look at the papers, Tommy had argued to Spillane months earlier. When's the last time you saw Bumpy Johnson's name? When's the last shooting in Harlem? That mattered. The old man's coasting. The territory's going soft. We move in, establish presence, and by Christmas we're running numbers from 110th to 145th. Spillane had been skeptical, but he was also getting old. And old men get tired of saying no to young men with ambition. Start small, he'd conceded. Test the waters. See what happens. What happened was 6 months of nothing. The Westies opened a card game on 116th. Nobody bothered them. They started moving heroin through a candy store on Lenox. Not a whisper of complaint. They leaned on a few shopkeepers for protection money. Checks cashed, no problems. See? Tommy had crowed. There's nobody home. Bumpy's a ghost story. But here's what they didn't see. Every move they made, every corner they turned, every hand they shook. It was all being watched, cataloged, assessed. Bumpy Johnson wasn't ignoring them. He was studying them, learning their patterns, identifying their weaknesses, waiting for the exact right moment to respond. And when that moment came, the response wasn't what anyone expected. Do you think silence always means weakness? Or could it mean something far more calculated? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because understanding this distinction is what separates amateurs from legends in any arena, business, politics, or the streets. The offer came to Marcus Williams on a Wednesday afternoon in late October. Marcus ran the barber shop on 125th and 7th, a legitimate business that also served as a clearinghouse for information. Bumpy stopped by twice a week for a trim and a conversation, and Marcus had been loyal since 1947, when Bumpy fronted him the money to buy the shop in the first place. Tommy O'Brien walked in without an appointment, flanked by 2 men Marcus didn't recognize. The shop went quiet. Even the clippers seemed to stop humming. Need a word? Tommy said, not asking. They stepped into the back office. Really just a converted storage. Closet with a desk and a radio. Tommy closed the door and got straight to business. We're establishing operations in Harlem, he said, pulling an envelope from his jacket. This is $5,000. Your cut for keeping us informed about Bumpy's movements. Who he sees, where he goes, what he's planning. Marcus stared at the envelope like it was a live snake. $5,000. That was more than the shop made in 6 months. That was his daughter's college tuition. That was the surgery his wife needed for her hip. That was everything. I don't do that kind of work, Marcus said, but his voice cracked on the last word. Tommy smiled. Not mean, almost sympathetic. Marcus, let me explain something. We're coming into Harlem whether you help us or not, that's decided. The question is whether you're smart enough to get paid while it happens. Bumpy's old. This thing he's built? It's already crumbling. We're just helping it along. He'll know. How? You're a barber. You listen. That's your job. Nobody suspects barbers. Tommy tapped the envelope. Take it. Buy your wife something nice. Get your daughter that education. And twice a week you tell us what you heard. That's it. Easy money. Marcus felt his hands shaking. The money sat there on the desk between them and he could smell it. That distinct paper and ink smell of fresh bills. He thought about his wife limping through the house, wincing with every step. He thought about his daughter, brilliant as sunshine, working 2 jobs while taking night classes. He thought about what $5,000 could do. And he thought about Bumpy Johnson, who'd looked him in the eye 14 years ago and said, "Pay me back when you can. No interest, no rush, just remember who helped you stand up." I need time to think, Marcus said. Tommy's smile didn't waver, but something cold flickered behind his eyes. Sure, you got until Friday, but Marcus, if you're not with us, we're going to assume you're against us. And we don't leave opposition in place, we remove it, understand? After they left, Marcus sat in that tiny office for an hour, staring at the envelope. He didn't touch it, didn't open it, just stared. The truth was, Tommy had read the situation perfectly. Harlem was changing. Younger guys were getting restless, questioning the old ways. The Italians were pushing harder from the south. The cops were cracking down on policy numbers. Maybe the Westies were the future. Maybe loyalty to Bumpy Johnson was like loyalty to a sinking ship. Or maybe, and this thought kept circling back, maybe Tommy O'Brien didn't understand Harlem at all. Marcus made his decision Thursday night. He called the number Bumpy had given him years ago for emergencies only. 3 rings, then a voice he didn't recognize. "I need to speak with Bumpy. Tell him Marcus from the barber shop. Tell him it's about money on a desk I didn't touch." Bumpy arrived at the shop after closing, alone. Marcus told him everything, every word. The envelope sat unopened on the desk between them. Bumpy listened without interruption, his face unreadable. When Marcus finished, there was a long silence. "How much?" Bumpy finally asked. 5,000. Bumpy nodded slowly like he was calculating something complex in his head. Then he stood up, buttoned his jacket, and picked up the envelope. "You did right," he said. "Go home to your wife. Kiss your daughter. Sleep easy. Tomorrow you're going to tell Tommy O'Brien yes." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "What?" "You're going to take the money. You're going to work for them. And you're going to tell them everything I want them to hear." Understanding dawned slowly. Marcus felt his breathing quicken. "But what if they won't?" Bumpy said, his voice carrying absolute certainty. "Because they don't understand the first thing about Harlem. They think information is power. They're wrong. In Harlem, misinformation is power. And you're about to become my greatest asset." Bumpy handed the envelope back. "Take it. Earn it. And Marcus, thank you for reminding me that loyalty still means something in this neighborhood. That's worth more than they're paying you." After Bumpy left, Marcus opened the envelope and counted. 5,000 exactly. He put it in the shop safe and went home to his family. Friday morning, he called Tommy O'Brien and said yes. "Here's my question for you. Was Marcus a traitor for taking the money? Or a hero for staying loyal? The line between survival and betrayal isn't always clear, is it? Let me know what you would have done in the comments below. What the Westies didn't know was that Marcus Williams wasn't Bumpy's only insurance policy. He was just the first domino. Over the next 2 weeks, the same scene played out across Harlem with remarkable consistency. The Westies identified key players, shop owners, numbers runners, jazz, club managers, anyone with visibility into the neighborhood's operations, and made their pitch. Cash up front, more to come, just keep your eyes open and your mouth shut. And one by one, these people came to Bumpy Johnson. Not all of them. Some took the money and stayed quiet, hoping to ride both sides. Some were true believers in the Westies' vision of new management. But enough came to Bumpy that within 10 days, he had a complete picture of the Westies' operation, their ambitions, and their timeline. More importantly, he had the channels to feed them exactly what he wanted them to believe. Bumpy held a meeting at a brownstone on Strivers Row, one of Harlem's most elegant blocks. 6 men attended, his inner circle, the ones who'd been with him since the 40s. They gathered in a second-floor sitting room where the autumn light slanted through tall windows, and Bumpy laid out the situation with the precision of a surgeon explaining a complex procedure. "They think we're weak," he began, standing by the window with his hands clasped behind his back. "They think silence means surrender. They've confused patience with inability. So we hit them," said Raymond Deuce Collins, his oldest lieutenant, a man whose scars told stories Bumpy had lived through. "Hit them hard, hit them public, send a message." Bumpy shook his head. "That's what they expect. That's what they understand. Violence is their language. If we speak it, we're playing their game on their terms." "Then what?" asked another man. "We speak a language they don't understand," Bumpy said. "We go silent." The room erupted in confusion. Voices overlapped, objections piled up. Bumpy let it run for 30 seconds, then raised one hand. The room quieted instantly. "Listen carefully," he continued. "The Westies have built their entire strategy on our response. They push, we push back. They escalate, we escalate. Eventually there's war, and war is where they excel. But what if we don't respond at all? What if we simply withdraw?" "Withdraw?" Deuce looked incredulous. "You mean abandon Harlem?" "I mean remove their ability to interface with Harlem. No confrontation. No negotiation, no acknowledgement. We don't answer their calls, we don't meet their people, we don't explain, we don't threaten, we don't engage. We become a closed system that they can't penetrate." One of the younger men spoke up. "But boss, our people who are feeding them information. We'll continue to feed them information," Bumpy interrupted. "But carefully curated information. Marcus Williams will tell them I'm planning a meeting with the Italians to form an alliance. That's not true. But they don't know that. Someone else will mention I'm sick considering retirement. Also not true. Another will suggest internal conflict. Young Turks ready to turn on me. Complete fiction. Understanding began to dawn on the faces around the room. We make them see what they want to see, Bumpy continued. An old man losing control, vulnerable. They'll think their strategy is working. They'll push harder. They'll get more aggressive. And the more aggressive they get, the more isolated they become. But what about our actual operations? Deuce asked. They continue, Bumpy said. But they continue without any interface with the Westies or their associates. Any business that's been compromised, we shut down temporarily. Any person who's dealing with them, we reroute around. We create a perfect information asymmetry. They think they see everything, but they see nothing real. He turned from the window, and the afternoon light caught his face in a way that made him look simultaneously older and more vital. The Westies believe in territory, he said. They believe you own a place by occupying it, by making noise, by planting your flag and daring anyone to remove it. But Harlem isn't territory. Harlem is community. And community isn't something you conquer. It's something you're either part of or you're not. The Westies aren't part of Harlem. They never will be. And once they understand that, once they feel what it means to be truly outside, they'll leave on their own. And if they don't? Someone asked. Bumpy's expression didn't change. Then we'll know they're even dumber than I thought, and we'll handle it accordingly. But they will, because isolation is worse than violence. Violence gives you something to fight against. Isolation gives you nothing but yourself. The meeting ended with clear assignments. Every person in Bumpy's network received the same instruction. Starting Monday, Harlem goes dark to the Westies. No calls returned. No meetings scheduled. No information shared. No conflict engaged. Complete radio silence. One more thing, Bumpy said as the men prepared to leave. When they try to find me, and they will, let them. I'll be exactly where I always am. But when they arrive, they'll find I'm unavailable. Always unavailable. Not hiding, not running, just unavailable. Nothing frustrates a bully more than a target that won't acknowledge their existence. Monday morning came, and Harlem transformed into a closed system. The Westies didn't notice at first. The transition was too subtle, too smooth. But by Wednesday, Tommy O'Brien was making phone calls that didn't get answered. By Friday, he was showing up at businesses that suddenly had closed signs in the windows, businesses that opened again the moment he left. By the following Tuesday, he was standing in Marcus Williams' barbershop, getting his hair cut, while Marcus fed him completely fabricated intelligence about Bumpy's declining health and imminent retirement. Word is, Marcus said, his clippers moving steadily. The old man's having meetings with the Italians, trying to form some kind of alliance, grasping at straws, if you ask me. Tommy smiled into the mirror. Everything was going according to plan. His plan. Harlem was crumbling. Bumpy was desperate. Victory was close. He had no idea he was already defeated. Here's my question. Is Bumpy Johnson a strategic genius protecting his community, or just a more sophisticated criminal than the ones trying to replace him? Subscribe for more untold legends, because the line between heroism and villainy in these stories is thinner than you think. 3 weeks after the warning became a joke, Tommy O'Brien sat in his Hell's Kitchen office and felt something he hadn't experienced since childhood. Genuine confusion bordering on fear. Nothing was working. Nothing made sense. And worst of all, nothing was happening. He'd sent men to speak with Bumpy Johnson directly. They found him at his usual spots, the Lenox Lounge, the Red Rooster, walking through Strivers Row like he owned the sidewalks. But every time they approached, Bumpy was suddenly in conversation, suddenly late for a meeting, suddenly unavailable. Not rude about it, never rude, just perpetually, impossibly unavailable. He'd tried to set up meetings through intermediaries. The intermediaries didn't call back. He'd offered better terms, higher percentages, sweetheart deals. Nobody responded. He'd even sent flowers to a funeral. Bumpy's cousin had died, and the flowers were returned the next day with a polite note saying the family preferred donations to the church. It was maddening. There was no enemy to fight, no war to win, no deal to strike, just absence where there should have been presence, silence where there should have been noise. Maybe we should pull back, Fitzy suggested one night, smoking a cigarette by the window. Regroup. Try a different approach. Pull back? Tommy's voice came out sharper than he intended. We haven't even made contact. How do you pull back from nothing? But that was exactly the problem, wasn't it? They were fighting nothing, and nothing was winning. The breaking point came on a Thursday night in late November. Tommy decided to force the issue. He took 8 men, his best, his most loyal, and drove straight into Harlem. Not to threaten, not to attack, just to exist, to make their presence undeniable, to force some kind of reaction. They set up at a corner of 135th and Lenox, right in the heart of the neighborhood. Prime real estate. Visible, bold, daring anyone to say something. And Harlem kept moving. People walked past them like they were furniture, like they were lampposts. A woman with groceries brushed by Tommy's shoulder without a glance. A kid bounced a basketball around their group, retrieved it, and continued playing. An old man shuffled past, paused to light a cigar 6 feet away, then shuffled on without acknowledging their existence. It was the most unsettling thing Tommy had ever experienced. Not hostility. Hostility he could work with. This was something else. This was erasure. This was being told without words that you simply didn't matter. "This is bullshit," one of his guys muttered. "Let's bust some heads, make some noise, get their attention." "No," Tommy said, but his voice lacked conviction. "That's what they want. They're trying to bait us into doing something stupid." But were they? Or was this exactly what Bumpy had planned all along? They stayed on that corner for 2 hours. Nobody spoke to them. Nobody challenged them. Nobody acknowledged them. It was like being a ghost in your own body, visible but unseen, present but ignored. Finally, as midnight approached, an old man crossed the street toward them. He was small, thin, wearing a wool coat that had seen better days. He walked with a cane but didn't lean on it. And something about the way he moved, the confidence, the certainty, made Tommy's instincts scream danger. "Evening, gentlemen," the old man said, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. Tommy recognized him from photographs. Bumpy Johnson. In person, finally, after weeks of absence. "We need to talk," Tommy said. "Do we?" Bumpy tilted his head, genuinely curious. "About what?" "About Harlem. About business. About how this is going to work." Bumpy nodded slowly, like he was considering a philosophical question. "Let me tell you something, son. You've been operating in Harlem for 6 months. You've moved product, run games, collected money, and not once, not one single time, have I stopped you. Do you know why?" Tommy didn't answer. "Because you haven't been operating in Harlem," Bumpy continued. "You've been operating in buildings that happen to be in Harlem, but you're not connected to Harlem. You don't know the people. You don't understand the rhythms. You're strangers in a place that doesn't have room for strangers. We've got money, we've got muscle, we've got nothing." Bumpy interrupted gently. "You've got nothing that matters here. Money. These people have been poor their whole lives. One more broke hustler or one less doesn't move the needle. Muscle? Son, these folks survived slavery, survived the Depression, survived every cop and every mob in New York trying to break them. You think they're scared of Irish boys from Hell's Kitchen?" He stepped closer and Tommy fought the urge to step back. 3 weeks ago, Bumpy said, "I sent you a warning. Not a threat. A warning. The difference is important. A threat says, do this or else. A warning says, I'm giving you information you need to survive." You treated it like a joke. That was your first mistake. Your second mistake was thinking silence means weakness. Let me explain something about power, since you clearly don't understand it. He gestured around at the street, at the buildings, at the life continuing around them like they didn't exist. Real power isn't loud. It isn't violent. It isn't even visible most of the time. Real power is when you don't have to do anything, and things still happen the way you want them to happen. Real power is when you can make someone disappear without lifting a finger. Not kill them, but erase them from relevance. That's what's happened to you. You didn't notice because you were too busy mistaking activity for progress. Tommy felt his hands balling into fists. "You can't just—" "I already did," Bumpy said simply. "You're standing in Harlem right now, but you're not in Harlem. You understand? You're like a man standing in a river claiming he's not wet. The water just moves around you, that's all we've done, moved around you." "We could make this ugly," Tommy said, hating how weak it sounded. "You could try," Bumpy acknowledged. "You could start shooting, start breaking things, start making noise. And you know what would happen? The police would come. Real police, not the ones you've got on your payroll. Federal agents. Because I know people too, son. And the minute you make this a public problem, it becomes a problem that brings attention nobody wants. Not you, not me, not the Italians you've been trying not to antagonize. So you won't make it ugly. You'll leave. Why would we leave? Bumpy smiled, and it was the saddest, kindest smile Tommy had ever seen. Because you already know you've lost. That's why you're here trying to force a confrontation. You thought if you could just get me to engage, you'd have something to work with. But son, I don't need to engage. That's the whole point. Harlem doesn't need to fight you. It just needs to not see you. And eventually you'll realize you're screaming in an empty room. He turned to leave, then paused. Go home, he said softly. Go back to Hell's Kitchen. Tell Mickey Spillane that Ellsworth Johnson said hello and that the old ways still work in Harlem. Tell him some territories aren't worth the taking, not because they're too strong to conquer, but because they're too unified to occupy. You can't hold ground where everyone pretends you're not standing on it. Bumpy walked away, his cane tapping against the pavement, and disappeared into the Harlem night like smoke dissolving into air. Tommy stood there with his 8 best men, in the heart of enemy territory, and realized with crystalline clarity that they'd never been in enemy territory at all. They'd been nowhere the entire time. The ride back to Hell's Kitchen was silent. Nobody had to say it out loud. They all knew. It was over. Not because they'd lost a fight, but because there was no fight to lose. You can't beat an opponent who won't acknowledge you exist. If this level of psychological warfare gave you chills, hit that like button right now. Because what Bumpy Johnson did wasn't just smart. It was a masterclass in understanding that sometimes the most devastating weapon isn't violence. It's indifference. The Westies pulled out of Harlem within a week. Not dramatically, not publicly, just quietly. Closed up their operations and returned to Hell's Kitchen. Word spread fast through New York's underworld, though the details remained murky. Some said there'd been a war that nobody saw. Others said Bumpy Johnson had made a deal with the devil. But the people who really understood power, the ones who operated in the shadows, they knew exactly what had happened. Bumpy Johnson had won without fighting. He'd defended territory without firing a shot. He'd humiliated an enemy without giving them anything to point at and call humiliation. It was beautiful in its simplicity, terrifying in its effectiveness. A few months later, a young journalist from the Amsterdam News, Harlem's newspaper, managed to get an interview with Bumpy. They sat in the back booth at the Lenox Lounge, and eventually the journalist asked about the Westies. What happened there? He asked. How did you stop them? Bumpy sipped his drink, considered the question. You're asking the wrong question. What's the right question? The right question is, why did they think they could start in the first place? Bumpy set down his glass. They looked at Harlem and saw peace. They interpreted peace as weakness. But peace isn't absence of power. Peace is power functioning so efficiently that force becomes unnecessary. You understand? The journalist wrote quickly, capturing every word. Violence is easy, Bumpy continued. Any fool can hurt people. But building something that works, building something sustainable, building something where people choose to participate because it's better than the alternative, that's hard. That's real power. The Westies are violent because violence is all they understand. We're peaceful because we don't need anything else. But what did you actually do? The journalist pressed. Bumpy smiled. Nothing. That's the lesson everyone keeps missing. I did nothing. I just stopped doing the things they needed me to do to make their plan work. I withdrew cooperation. I removed access. I turned Harlem into a closed system they couldn't penetrate. Not through force, through consensus. Because everyone here decided individually and collectively that the Westies didn't belong. He leaned forward and his voice dropped. Power isn't what you can force people to do. Power is what people choose to do without you asking. Every store owner who closed when they showed up, every phone call that didn't get answered, every meeting that didn't happen. That wasn't me ordering people around. That was Harlem deciding for itself. That's the difference between control and community. Control breaks when you stop enforcing it. Community reinforces itself. The interview ran the following week. It didn't make the front page. That was reserved for Martin Luther King Jr.'s latest speech. But people in Harlem read it. More importantly, people in the underworld read it. The lesson spread like gospel. Don't fight Bumpy Johnson. You can't beat him because he won't fight you. And if you can't make him fight, you can't win. Years later, after Bumpy died in 1968, that corner of 135th and Lenox where Tommy O'Brien had stood with 8 men, trying to make Harlem acknowledge his existence, that corner became legendary. They called it the Ghost Corner, where the Westies learned what real power looks like. Because here's the truth that most people never learn. The loudest person in the room is rarely the most powerful. The most powerful person is the one who can make things happen without saying a word, who can shift reality without lifting a finger, who can win without fighting. That was Bumpy Johnson. That was Harlem. And that warning that became a joke? It became a legend instead. A story told in every mob bar, every policy room, every place where people thought they understood power. The story of how silence defeated noise, how community defeated force, how patience defeated aggression. The warning was never a joke. The joke was thinking it was. Now here's what I need you to do. If you found this story valuable, if it changed how you think about power, about conflict, about strategy, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And then come back next week because I'm going to tell you about the time a 15-year-old kid walked into Frank Costello's office with nothing but a chessboard and walked out with the Italian mob's respect. The setup alone will blow your mind. That story drops next Tuesday. Don't miss it. Until then, remember, real power whispers, only weakness screams.